Vanakkam from Semmozhi Multimedia Center of Central Institute of Classical Tamil. This is Dr. Madhusudhanan Kalaichelvan to continue with the story of the anklet, Silappadhikaram. The work, epic work, Silappadhikaram has four more such grand operas, grand as in story and in depth, but several of them are very short as opposed to Silappadhikaram. But the collection of these five epic works are very proudly classified as the Aimperum Kappiyangal, or the five great kavyas of Tamil language. Every kavya has its own grammar very prescribed. So, an author who is attempting to write a kavyam should follow those principles. Silappadhikaram, Manimekalai, Kundalakesi, Valayapati and Sivaga Chintamani. These are the five works which are attributed as five ornaments of Tamil Annai, or the personification of Tamil language as the goddess herself. When it is the goddess, you adorn her with jewelry. Interestingly, all these five works are named after a piece of jewelry. Sivaga Chintamani. Chintamani is this gemstone that adorns the crown. It is that very lustrous stone which is worthy of being placed right there at the zenith. So, it is the crown which has the Chintamani. And then you have Valayapati, the bangles as the story says. Kundalakesi, or the kuntalam that this mother goddess, the personification of Tamil language, wears as a pair of earrings. And then you have Silappadhikaram, which adorns her ankles, and Manimekalai, or the hip chain that she drapes around. So, these five epics of Tamil language are very much celebrated and brought together and compiled as the Aimperum Kappiyangal, or the five great epic works. Of course, the first two of these are pretty lengthy and very rich as opposed to the remaining three. The twin works called Silappadhikaram and Manimekalai. These are the two works, two individual works, but one gets over and gives a start, a heads up to the next one. So, these are also celebrated as a pair of works, the twin works that they are, twin operas that they are. Silappadhikaram has been authored by Ilangovadigal. Who is this author? What do we know about him? Well, popular stories on Ilangovadigal identifies him as a Chera prince. Chera dynasty is one of the three popular ancient dynasties of Tamil land, and they can be geographically identified with today's Kerala, predominantly today's Kerala, and parts coming up over today's Tamil Nadu also, certain parts of Tamil Nadu also. Vanji has been the capital city. It is identified as several cities in today's Kerala. That aside, somewhere in Kerala, let us keep it at that level. And he is identified as to belong to the royal dynasty of the Chera kings. And his father is identified as Imayavaramban Cheralathan, and his mother is identified as Narchonai, a princess from the Chola country. Back then, the kingdoms had marital relationship. So, a Chola princess has been married to the Chera king, and so they are the parents, the father and mother of Ilangovadigal. But he had an elder brother called Cheran Chenguttuvan. He was the next heir in throne, Cheran Chenguttuvan. It is said, one fine day, walked into the courtroom of Cheralathan was a fortune teller, an astrologer maybe, or a saintly bard who could predict the fortune. And as he walked in, after greetings and invocations, he somehow identified Ilango, the younger brother, and pointed out to him and said, he is the next heir. Going by my belief and my thoughts on astrology, he is the next heir. So, he was identified by the astrologer. But Ilangovadigal thought for a moment, if my zodiacal arrangements or the planetary positions or the astrology or fate, call it by whatever name, is going to zero down upon me as the next king and cause botheration to my elder brother, who was actually technically the next in heir, let me give up on this. Let me take up monkhood and enter a monastery and lead the life of a saint. So, this was in a way his tyagam. He came forward and said, let me not cause a trouble in the long list of celebrated Chera kings. So let me give up on this position of mine as the younger prince. So let me take up monkhood. Once I enter monkhood, I cannot be brought back and reinitiated as the king. So let it be upon my elder brother to take charge and let him rule. Saying so, it is believed that he walked out of the kingdom, gave up on all the comforts of being a prince, and entered a monastery, led the life of an ascetic, a brahmachari, a sannyasi more so. And that is exactly where his affiliation, the religious affiliation that he had, comes to a question. Some say that he probably entered a Jain monkhood, or some say he probably entered into another school of thought. But that aside, this is a popular story of Ilangovadigal. Historically speaking, can this be credited by available historic sources? Seems like not really, because we have a Sangam work called Paditruppathu, which is an unofficial documentation on the lives and history of the Chera dynasty. It talks about several kings. It tells about their wars, their war victories, their contributions towards the dynasty, their connections, and who they were, what they were, their qualities, and more. So this work called Paditruppathu does not really refer to an Ilango who gave up on his supposed kingship and entered a monastery and led the life of a sannyasin. So there are several other such points to be noted, and so some say that this cannot be possible. Now then we have this continuation of Silappadhikaram. As I told you, this another equally fascinating work called Manimekalai, which was authored by an individual, a poet called Kalaichelvan. Satan refers to somebody who was deeply well versed with the Shastras, somebody who protected Dharma and who went by the code books. So he was called a Shastan, somebody who was a scholar of Shastras. So his name resembles this wise old man of every society who knew it all, whom you could approach and ask for doubts and how to move forward. So this individual called Kalaichelvan is the author of Manimekalai. It is widely believed that he, after having learnt about certain divine interventions, informed Ilangovadigal or narrated the story of Silappadhikaram and probably inspired him to write this grand opera. But these are all what are associated as popular stories. Some very serious scholars accept this as an oral tradition or an account to hail the work and bring it some kind of a royal patronage, and so these are accounts on it. Again, for somebody who is here to appreciate the literature, let's just learn and know about these accounts and put it aside. To come forward and wishfully fighting to establish it is not the scope of this series, in fact. So that is all what we know about Ilangovadigal. Apart from these informations, you do have certain anecdotes which involves Ilangovadigal, but that may be for a later time. Now to the story. So after having walked into the monastery, started living the life of a saint, Ilangovadigal was impressed to write this story. This is a story of a couple who were born and raised in Pumbuhar, a very beautiful coastal port town of the Cholas, and who got married there, and the story begins from there. But what is the crux of the story, the philosophy that this opera comes forward to say? Apparently, Ilangovadigal's prelude to Silappadhikaram makes a list of 3 learnings, 3 takeaways from this work. And those 3 are very, very deep in dharmic reflections of the Tamil society. The 3 works, it talks about Arasiyal Pilaittorku Aram Kootrahum. Literally translated, I am just trying to translate it. The phrase there talks about how kingship is associated with dharma, how the scepter of the king, which has got to be held up high, has been supported by dharma. If he flaws, if the king's justice is invalid or flawful, dharma will become yama there and claim his life. So the kings feared the god of dharma as much as Yama himself. And we have the tradition of addressing Yama, the god of death, as Yama Dharma. He is Dharma Raja, Yama Dharma Raja. He is so much into Dharma that there is no stance for what he likes, what is his wish or his will. He goes very much by the code book. The prescribed laws are what he lives for. He will be in fact punished by the ultimate Swami, who is Shiva, if he fails Dharma. So, Dharmaraja or Yama is so much into protecting Dharma. And here we have the first takeaway from Silappadhikaram, which is a very direct advice to kings or people who were associated with justice, people on whom was bestowed upon this privilege of enquiry and delivering justice. So, he says, Arasiyal Pilaittorku, for people who make a flaw in politics or judiciary, call it whatever, because all of this were put together back then. The administration, if there is a flaw in it, Dharma will become Yama for you. He'll claim your life. Arasiyal Pilaittorku aram kootragum. That's the first takeaway. The second is, Uraisal Pattiniyai Uyarndor Yettuvar. Pativratyam, or the woman who went by her chastity, she will be elevated to the level of divinity. She will be worshipped for what she is. And the primary character here is this woman called Kannagi, whose personification of Dharma. So, she and her love for her husband and the way she dealt with her life is all going to elevate her to the level of a goddess herself. Till date, in many parts of South India and as an extension into Sri Lanka also, this aspect of goddess, elevating her to goddess, is very popularly seen. She is worshipped as a mother goddess for her chastity. Her Pativratyam earned her this highly elevated pedestal of being claimed as a goddess who is worthy of worship. Women prayed to her for progeny, for fertility, for wealth, good health and longevity of her married life too. So, she is held up there as a personification of Devi Shakti, and so her Pativratyam is celebrated. So, the second takeaway is for women, and the third is about fate. Ool Vinay, or the calculated karma will always chase you. There is no way you can escape from karma. As it is popularly referred to today, it is certainly a boomerang. You throw something, it will come back to you. So, karma is a boomerang is probably the third popular takeaway that you have. So, these are the three learnings of Silappadhikaram. Thankfully, in the prelude of the grand epic, Ilangovadigal makes a list of these three learnings. So, these are the three valid points around which the entire story is going to be woven, and the huge fabric of Silappadhikaram gets us to zero down and understand these three principles. As I told you, this is a beautiful story which has a lot of political influence into it. In fact, it is identified as a work which starts from the Chola country, and the characters literally travel, they physically travel from the Chola capital of Pumbuhar city, the port town, the ancient port town of the Cholas on the east coast, the Coromandel coast of the peninsula, walk all the way to the capital of the Pandya dynasty, which is the grand old city of Madurai, that's synonymous with wealth and prosperity and colorfulness and joyous and joy and whatnot. So, they travel to Madurai. All the turning point events where the complete life of the couple takes a 180-degree turn is at Madurai, and Kannagi apparently loses her husband there to justice which was flawful. A mistaken enquiry ends up in killing her husband. Then she walks all alone to Vanchi, which is on the west coast, which is also the capital town of the Chera kings. So, the inaugural part of it, the opening scenes and major shift in lifestyle, all that happens in the east coast, the port town of Pumbuhar or Kaveri Pumpattinam as it is called, the very, very wealthy, rich port town of the ancient Cholas, travels all the way, the storyline travels, cutting across landscapes talking about rivers, water bodies, mountains, temples, towns, whatnot, reaches Madurai, where the turning point of the story happens, and partly the climax also happens in Madurai, and the last winding up scenes travels to the west coast. So it kind of connects these three ancient dynasties, and it is set in the capital cities of these three dynasties. Kaveri Poompattinam or Poombuhar, both these names refer to this ancient port town of the Cholas on the east coast of the southern peninsula. Even today, it is a small town which has reduced itself into a popular fishery hamlet, or where people from nearby villages and towns go once a while. It's more like a small recreation coastal stretch, but once upon a time it was almost the political and economic capital of the Cholas. Several poems from Sangam literature talks about the wealth that the city reverberated with, the broad streets, classification of housing, having houses where foreigners could stay, mansions where people from other country could be housed, talking about people following different occupation, having their own sectors in which they lived, they worked, markets, both in the day and in the night, huge vessels that came afloat and were tethered somewhere there. In fact, very recent underwater archaeology in and around Poombuhar, very recent as in the last couple of decades, have identified the remnants of a port that probably submerged. So, being literally on the coast, such natural calamities are quite possible, but nevertheless, it has been once upon a time the most celebrated port town. Also, it is known for its sanctity because Kaveri, the almost perennial river of South India, which is treated at par with the Ganga for the divinity that she carries, she starts from the Western Ghats in Karnataka and travels all the way down, enters Tamil Nadu and flows through what we call as the Delta region, creating so much fertile agricultural pastures, and finally enters the east coast right in this little town called Kaveri Poompattinam. Literally, it means that city or a settlement on the coast where Kaveri enters the sea. So that's a very identical, very beautiful and quite a sacred ancient temple town, a port town, economic capital of the Cholas, from where the story starts. And there, the community to which the hero and the heroine belong to are the wealthy merchant class. The opening chapters talks about the ancestry of the two prominent characters, the hero and the heroine, Kovalan and Kannagi. Their ancestral wealth, the family background is all described, and to have an auspicious opening, Ilango Vadigal authors the first chapter as the grand wedding of the couple, Kovalan and Kannagi. More on the wedding and how it was celebrated, people who attended it, and what happened immediately after the marriage in the next part of the series. Signing out here, Dr. Madhusudhanan Kalaichelvan. Nandri, Vanakkam.